Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. It's me Gamerturk, and Dengeki Playstation Magazine in Japan had quite the extensive interview with Sword Art Online Gameworks lead and Alicization Lycoris producer Yousuke Futami, Sword Art Online author Reki Kawahara, and his editor Miki Kazuma. The interview has a lot of interesting things, such as War of Underworld seemingly not being part of Alicization Lycoris and the SAO Gameworks coming to an end, so let's get into it all. First off, a huge shout out to Gishimenas as always, who has shared quite the extensive translation/summary of the interview on Twitter so us mortals could understand it in the first place. Secondly, you should definitely follow me on Twitter because simply tweeting these is a whole lot faster than making videos, and you can get access to the latest news by doing so much faster. And last but not least, make sure to subscribe for the most reliable Sword Art Online news on YouTube so you are not left at the mercy of foxes. Only 16% of you are subscribed, up by 2% since I started mentioning these, so it seems to be working. Anyways, on to the interview. We'll go one by one and I'll cut out the bits that appear quite insignificant and add my opinions on certain things as well. It starts with Reki Kawahara mentioning that he didn't think it was possible to turn something as large as Alicization into a game in the first place. In fact, this it's an ongoing narrative. If you ever read Sword Art Online Light Novels, his chats with SAO Gameworks lead Yousuke Futami has appeared multiple times in the afterwards sections of his books. At a certain point, they even joke about turning Alicization into a game and how impossibly huge it would be. But here we are, years later, waiting for the release of an Alicization game. Although regarding the size of it, we got some disclaimers to cover, as we got notable measures to cut down the size of the game mentioned in this interview. Upon the mention of one of Futami's earlier interviews where he stated he wanted to adapt all the arcs that were featured in the original vision for Sword Art Online, aka the web novels, into games. By the way, web novels are no longer canon to the main series as the light novel releases refined a whole lot of things. And also that Ordinal scale does not count because it was an anime original story and was not from any of the novels. And Miki simply felt the urge to remind him that Asuka Empire is from the novels. Joke all you want about Miki wanting to create more SAO content, but this is a great mention, not only because it opens up avenues for more SAO games, but also brings a spotlight to a part of the series that rarely gets any attention, and maybe him testing the waters for a Sword Art Online alternative Clover's Regret anime adaptation. Sure, it's kinda sad that Futami has no intentions to make an Ordinal scale game for the time being, but Asuka Empire is quite the interesting place as well, so yeah, while our current next stop is Lycoris, some speculation to look forward to afterwards. But another great deed from Miki, it appears Futami planned to actively stop making SAO games before, and Miki was the one to convince him to stay, so we all owe a huge thank you to Miki on this. Another bit I find interesting is that Futami was in charge of Fatal Bullet at the beginning, but he passed on the project to Minami somewhere midway. It's also mentioned that he planned to pass Lycoris on to him as well, possibly the mention of leaving the series in the previous bit, but due to Fatal Bullet's popularity, he changed his mind. I find the former to be intriguing. I mean, something always felt wrong about Fatal Bullet, especially its story compared to its marketing, and the fact that there was a top leadership change midway explains so much of this. In fact, these kinds of, well, quote-unquote boring stories, so to say, can be found in many games that had massive vision changes throughout the development. As an avid Destiny player, Destiny 1 Vanilla comes to mind, where a new story was scrapped together from the already created assets mid-development, leading to an awfully empty feeling story. Of course, while we do not know if there were significant rewrites with the leadership change in regards to Fatal Bullet, it certainly feels like they set off with the "your choices matter" motto, but shaped into a, I don't know, just go through these areas and do stuff until the climax of the game where we'll have some resemblance of a story instead. But with that, Futami starts talking about Alicization Lycoris and how they set out to start with adapting the Human Realm arc, which was supposed to act as the prologue of Lycoris' true story, but the supposed prologue turned out to be 10 hours worth of content. He even jokes about the amount of content he had to work on for Lycoris project. Kirito's voice actor Yoshitsugu Matsuoka apparently recorded 15,000 words for Lycoris. In comparison, the figure was 8K for SAO Alicization, which is the longest SAO game prior to Lycoris. It's obviously not clarified whether the figures are for base game or including the DLCs, but however you look at it, that is almost double the figure. But of course, with the mention of the game's length, how to manage that length came into question, especially since the anime had omitted scenes, to which Reki had to interject with the mention of the Zakaria tournament, an entire chapter that established the corruptness of the nobility, the limits and workarounds of the taboo index, and the mysterious observer hiding in Kirito's hair, helping them throughout their journey despite her orders. But sadly, Futami mentioned that they would never be done if they were to include absolutely everything, so for the 4th time now, Zakaria appears to be a casualty. The anime, the main canon manga adaptation, Alicization Lycoris manga adaptation, and now Alicization Lycoris itself. Although let's not get all our hopes down, Futami never said it was cut out, it was just made into a digest form, so let's hope we'll at least get some duels and some fun moments like Kirito fucking up with the judges when he's performing his sword skill so they can't see his mistakes. Futami also mentions that once the game original arc begins, we will be returning to the Norlangarth North Empire and we will be able to experience Zakaria in a different light there. I'm just hoping we first experienced Zakaria in a normal light to some extent before speaking of different lights. But then the interview goes into other empires and monsters around. The topic was mentioned in earlier interviews as well, but basically each empire is explorable in Lycoris, and Lycoris team worked with Kawahara to fill a lot of the blanks. The core difference is that there is a lot of wildlife and magic beasts around. The main point being, well, without anything to fight, it's not much of a game, is it? Anyways, they changed the lore to accommodate for these, so I don't think anyone should have any complaints here. Then we move on to story bits and some focus on Medina. Remember when they mentioned Human Realm arc is the prologue to Lycoris' story? Well, it's kinda elaborated here, but as we have already seen in the Lycoris manga, Kirito and Yujo come across Medina quite early on in their journey to Zakaria and then meet again at the academy. The reason for this was that Futami wanted to portray Medina's personality clearly and extensively compared to, let's say, an Integrity Knight who is mostly a facade, a shell of the person that came before in that body. Reki Kawahara apparently supervises the game's story as he usually does, but he's also very busy as he usually is. So he has read only the central parts of the story, also partially because he does not want to get spoiled about the story of the game. I don't think that's how you supervise a project. One of the more important mentions is the reason why they went back to Kirito being the protagonist of the story. Well, I've been saying this since the beginning, but now you can hear it straight from the source. Alicization simply does not work without Kirito. The tech exists because of Kirito, the events that tie into it exist because of Kirito, the events that transpire in it happen because of Kirito. But here comes the main dish of the interview. The interviewer asks if War of Underworld is gonna be in Alicization Lycoris, and Futami starts acting quite sketchy and tries avoiding the question without a clear answer. He begins with joking about requiring another full development cycle, talks about how big Dark Territory is and how big the cast becomes. He had complained about the amount of characters in Alicization in earlier interviews as well. The thing is, while the Dark Territory is big, it doesn't have much of interest at all. It's a barren wasteland except for some minor bits and pieces, so the size of it is not much of an issue. And in fact, in the trailer alone, we have seen some places that resemble the Dark Territory, so again, we may be walking the fine line of, well, I can't talk about those matters at the moment situation. On top of this, there are still 2 unnamed DLCs, but it is mentioned that whether or not they will have Dark Territory is still up in the air, and that I have to call out. It's 1.5 months away. The game is only 1.5 months away. That means the game is pretty much complete in the development cycle, and while a portion of the devs are probably working on polish and bug fixing, the rest of the devs are already working on at least the first DLC. As things stand, they also have their internal roadmap of planned content for the DLCs anyways, so even if the second DLC has not yet started being developed, the contents of it, something glaringly big like if it'll have Dark Territory or not, for example, are all decided. You don't set out to make a huge game, spend 3 years developing it, and then not know what your DLCs will feature or not, hoping to figure it out on the go. They know what the DLCs will have, they are just not in a position to talk about them just yet. So take the commentary about the Dark Territory and War of Underworld with a grain, no, with an entire mountain's worth of salt right now. But with that explanation out of the way, map size. First off, Underworld is too big. Yes, we heard that before. It's quite empty in general as well, aside from the human empire. So, as expected, Lycoris is quite big as well. Lycoris' map size is twice the size of Fatal Bullet's maps. Now, I'm not sure if they're referring to individual map sizes or cumulative map size of the entire games, but either way, it's bigger than Fatal Bullet, which is not hard of an achievement. I'm pretty sure SAO Alicization was already bigger than Fatal Bullet. Fatal Bullet just wasn't very ambitious with its map in the first place, but as mentioned before, the devs got a lot of direction from Reki himself for other empires or the unknown locations of the Norlangarth North Empire. Funnily enough, Akuria had created an ocean/beach for the game, but then it was revealed to them that an ocean does not exist in Underworld in the first place and thus had to turn it into a lake. Now this bit I find interesting. As we know since a while ago, you can customize Kirito. He'll still be Kirito for story's sake, but you can customize his appearance and names regardless if you're into that stuff, like in SAO Alicization and SAO Fragment. If you have customized and renamed your Kirito, it will appear as NPCs in other players' games. Now that is a pretty neat idea. Until you come across this rainbow-colored spike hair guy with the badass motorcyclist attitude at a coffee shop in the middle of Centauria. Kawahara was then prompted to ask questions to Futami, so we got some clarifications, and his first concern was administrator wearing clothes. After a quick chuckle, Futami explains that overseas game content rating made it impossible, so yeah, you can thank ESRB and PEGI for allowing gambling in games that are made for 3 and above, but not allowing magical hair that prevents full nudity in games for 15+. Very cool rating system, guys, good job. Kawahara mentions Selka, and Futami states that currently Selka is not assigned a weapon type at all, as I had previously speculated, so she can only use sacred arts as a means of combat. However, he mentions that she can get some regular attacks if players really want it. Meanwhile, Kawahara is just glad Selka is getting more screen time in Lycoris. Next question of Kawahara was about Fizel and Linel, so Futami clarified that they are two properly separate characters, not a two-in-one character in a way, and while they are very similar in nature, both being dagger users, they both have their own flair to it. During the closing remarks, Futami mentioned that he has great expectations for SAO's future in general, and Miki interjected, what he really wanted to say was, as usual, another setting hard to adapt to a game, please more. Knowing the history of how SAO games came to be, with constant talks between Reki and Futami about how impossible certain things are and how much Futami loves trying to achieve the impossible, yeah, that sounds about right. His response to Miki was, true, Unital Ring is just impossible. How many years would it take for it? Ordinal scale is impossible too, please have mercy. But yeah, that's pretty much the contents of the interview. Again, some things are to be taken with huge amounts of salt, some things are just casual shitposty conversations between the trio, and some neat information here and there. But what's better than a trio? A quartet! Get your Lens Squad merch featuring an amazing quartet of chibi rabbits. Visit my Teespring shop. Patrons and channel members even get $5 discount code in their respective community feeds. As always though, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay cool.